or you can unmute, ask questions as we go through. This is kind of a participation, if you like. More importantly, the presentation that Jeff and I put together, we've been doing it together for almost eighth, ninth time. We've been going to different offices and putting it together. More importantly, it's just trying to get agents' ideas, thoughts of how to get some business. We saw the market change in a while back, so we started this presentation in particular, and I focus on agents looking at how do you get more business. This is more than just business. One of the things you can look at or listen to this. Here's a question, maybe hoping anyone can answer. How many transactions do you think there are in a 1031 exchange transaction? Think about that. How many? When you're working with a buyer, you're working with a buyer. And how many transactions is that? One.
Very few.
How many in a 1031 exchange?
I'm not sure.
No, total. If you got a 1031 exchange transaction, how many transactions are part of that?
4.
4? Here's some things to think about. The 1031, you have an investor that is selling. If they purchase another one, that's 2. If they sell one, and one of Jeff's slides is really critical, is about people that you may know in the Bay Area. They sell for $5 million. And they buy more than one, how many transactions do you have? Maybe more?
Yeah.
One investor. Then on top of it, who's currently renting the property? So you get one opportunity. This is just looking, that's how we started this. It's more important to look at the standpoint of how many transactions can you get out of this 1031 exchange. Even talking about it, Jeff and I had a conversation last week. How many people really understand 1031 exchange? Agents and or people. The key is most people don't even know what a 1031 exchange is. And I think trying to bring to light is bringing you as an expert and just an expert at 1031 is having a conference call so that you can get more opportunities and business from it. Again, one of the slides you want to pay really clear attention to is one of the just slides about the Bay Area. So if you know of anyone that lives here, that's a client, and maybe someone in the Bay Area that has investment properties, think about it. If they've got an investment property in the Bay Area or out of the area, just think, how many transactions can they maybe diversify that one property? Think about it. And a lot of different options in there. This class more specifically started because we're looking at people that are 62 and older, kind of a reverse mortgage. You could do it 55, but more importantly, people that are retiring, looking at moving. So a couple of conversations maybe you could put in social media is, do you know what a 1031 exchange is? Have you thought about moving? What about your retirement? What about hedging your investments with inflation, recession? What's the best transaction, best instrument for a recession, hedging against inflation? Big comment is typically real estate. Huge amount of appreciation over the last several years. The forecast right now is there from MBS Highway. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Barry B. talks about it. He's looking at interest rates going down to about 5%, 5.5% in the first half of the year. And the reason for that, more importantly, is that the CPI numbers are coming up January 12th, showing how much inflation is increasing or decreasing. They're expecting that decrease. So the expectation is inflation is going to check, and rates are expected to decrease. So what's going to happen? Rates start decreasing. There's a pent-up demand, lack of inventory. What's going to happen? So those people that are on the fence, you may want to start to educate them right now. Are you going to wait till rates drop and then the majority of the people out there are going to start to purchase? Then you may be in a competitive bid war again. So if you want that, or maybe, think about option of maybe purchasing now and then refinancing later at rates drop. More importantly is that you want to get into that bidding war. There's a frenzy was there. More importantly is that, you could participate in that, but we're not looking for you to participate in that. We want you to get the best transaction, best deal. So Jeff, you want to start your presentation?
Okay.
And any questions, please ask. I typically kind of moderate with Jeff when we talk about just different, every time we do this, I come up with some ideas of maybe more ideas of how to get more business. Right there.
Can you see the slide?
No, I don't see it.
Yeah, hang on 1 second. That's fine. Okay,
Yes.
1 moment.
Oh, okay.
Almost there. Everybody on Zoom can see you, so we're good there.
Okay.
All right, Jeff, take it away.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So as Dennis was talking about 1031 exchanges, we were very busy in December because a lot of people were shuffling their properties around. So we're going to think a little bit outside the box. Instead of doing rental for rental, what are the opportunities that are available in the 1031 exchange? So what I'll do is go over some of the basic requirements, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the opportunities. So the number one question that I always get is, what can you buy, right? What does like kind mean under a 1031 exchange? So you're selling an investment property, and to the IRS, like kind means anything and everything except the primary residence. You could do a 1031 exchange to and from in all 50 states. So you're not stuck in California. You could go to Florida, Nebraska, Texas to do the 1031 exchange to and from any other state. So that's why if you have a single family rental, you can buy multifamily, you can buy commercial, you can buy condo, you could buy the DSTs, you could buy land is also exchangeable as long as they hold it as investment property. So we're seeing a lot of people buy lots because they're available, because a lot of them are being sold right now. So that's something to think about. And then eventually they'll sell it when the values go back up. So they're kind of land banking that type of property. So what's not exchangeable is basically primary residence at the bottom here, because you're under the section 121 of the tax code, which says as a primary residence, if they live there 2 out of the past 5 years, they get up to $250,000 for a single person, $500,000 for a married couple filing joint. And this is over and above what they bought it for, right? Because these are of the profits. And so that's why a lot of people think that they could do a 1031 exchange on a primary residence if they haven't lived there for 2 years. And that is wrong. That is an absolute no. You cannot do that. Other things that you cannot do a 1031 exchange on are flippers, right? So if you have investors that are going to be doing flips, those are considered dealer property or inventory. And that's why you cannot do a 1031 exchange on flip properties. Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, even though you hold it like in a REIT or a partnership, are not exchangeable, right? Unless the partnership does the 1031 exchange, then the whole partnership would have to do it. Personal properties have been eliminated from the code in January 1st, 2018. So no longer can you do machinery, equipment, collectibles on those types of 1031 exchanges. Any questions about what is like kind? So the next question that we get is, who's supposed to do the 1031 exchange? So the IRS is always looking for continuity of ownership. So whoever is selling, it has to be the buyer. So if it's an individual, John Smith, he would have to be the buyer to the new property. If he wants to add somebody to the purchase, it's going to dilute the interest that he's going to be buying into the new property. Okay. Single member LLC, it could be either John Smith or the single member LLC. As soon as it becomes a multi-member, like Dennis and I, since we have different tax entities, tax IDs, that's considered a partnership. Therefore, the partnership would have to do the 1031 exchange. The only time when you have a multiple member or multiple owner, tenants in common, then each tenant in common could do their own exchange, or they have to do it together. So either the whole tenancy in common has to do the exchange, or each individual will have to do their separate thing, either pay the tax or do a 1031 exchange. So here are some myths that are out there right now that we hear a lot. Is how much do I need to buy? Because a lot of your clients are going to go to the internet and they're going to say, oh, all I have to do is reinvest my gain to do a 1031 exchange. That's not correct. Okay. And the other thing that they say is, oh, I just don't have to touch the money to do a 1031 exchange. That's only partly correct. So what has to happen is all the net proceeds have to be the down payment to purchase the new property. The second thing everybody forgets is the debt. If there's a $300,000 loan that's being paid off, they have to get what? A new loan equal to or more of 300,000 or more on the new property that they buy. So under the 1031 exchange, what you always hear is what? Whatever you sell for, if I sell for $1 million under the 1031 exchange, I have to buy $1 million or more to do a fully tax deferred exchange, because you got to replace all the net proceeds and replace the debt. So that's why the debt is the critical part. So we always ask how much loan is being paid off on the sale, because they either got to bring in cash to offset that debt balance, or they got to get a new loan with Bank of America to get that debt balance in place. So that's why for you as the agent, if you're working with an investor, they sell $1 million, you're going to help them what? Buy $1 million or more if they want to do a fully tax deferred exchange. If they only buy 900, then that $100,000 difference is taxable as capital gains. So it's not a return of their investment. Okay, so that's why you got to make sure that you're going laterally across equal to or more to do a fully tax deferred exchange.
Jeff, there was a question on there.
Go ahead.
About business. See it on the chat?
I don't think so.
Oh, you can't see the chat.
If a resident is being used as a business, can it be considered in a 1031 exchange? So the residence is the whole resident going to be considered? If you're running, let's say, a daycare facility out of your property, and so that portion of the business can be considered business use, right? So therefore, you have to factor that out of the resident property and do it under the 1031 exchange. So yes, the resident can be part of it for assisted care facility or a senior care facility. Yes, the resident, the real estate portion of it. However, the business part of it is not. So if you have a biz op also attached to it, then the biz op is excluded from the sale or has to be factored out. So hopefully that answers that question. But yes, residents can with businesses in it can be a 1031 exchange. So when you talk to your clients, you always talk about the benefits of the 1031 exchange, right? And it's basically the number one benefit is not the deferral of capital gains tax, is to increase their portfolio of wealth by not paying the taxes and using the tax money to buy more property. These are the other things that a lot of people don't talk about. And this was Dennis was talking about, that we're talking about things outside of the box, management relief, right? Instead of having tenants, maybe help family members, increase cash flow, sell one property, buy multiple properties. You could leverage by going out of state and buying bigger or multiple properties. You could diversify, get out of the real estate, get into the commercial or single tenant, triple net properties. And you can consolidate. If you have a lot of rentals and you want one big property, you could sell two to buy one, and vice versa. You could sell one to buy two.
One of the comments, and Jeff and I have been working together a lot in these presentations, is finding out, more importantly, where the parents live and where the kids live. The key is that the parents are retired. High probability they're going to move to the kids if they're out of state or if they're here. One of the big things is the part Jeff and I have a transaction where the parents are actually 1031 exchange and buying a property for their kids. So to look at that might be, I'm not sure, did you put that in your slide too, Jeff?
Yep.
Okay, Jeff will go through that too.
So the delay process, okay, it always starts at closing. So it's not when you get the listing, it's not when you get an offer, it's not when you open up escrow. It's always going to be based upon closing. So if you don't close, nothing's triggered, no exchange. So that's why I always consult with your CPA, your tax advisors, with us to determine whether or not the 1031 exchange is going to be feasible or not. Once you close, you have 180 days, approximately 6 months to complete the exchange. The first 45 days is the critical part. You must identify the target properties. The first rule is called the 3-property rule. You can identify first choice, second choice, third choice, unlimited in value. And then you just have to buy one of those properties that you submit to us by the end of the 45th day. And then you have 180 days to make sure that you close on one of those 3 properties. The second rule is when you want to diversify your portfolio. It's called the 200% rule. This is where you can identify twice the value of what you sold. So let's say you want to identify 10 properties and we sold that property for $1 million. We can identify 10 properties. Let's say we're going out of state to Texas, and we can identify those 10 properties as long as they add up to less than $2 million. That's a good identify. And then I just have to pick and choose of those 10 properties to satisfy my $1 million exchange. And so those are the 2 rules for the identification. There is an exception to the rule, which is called the 95% exception. That means if you mess up on the first rule, you identify 5 properties, you automatically drop to the second rule. And then during the second rule, it's over 200% or twice your value. If you're 3 times the amount, the IRS says you must purchase 95% of the total value you identified, and then they'll let your exchange go through. So be careful with that because a lot of people don't use it. It's very rare that somebody uses the 200% rule with the 95% rule attached to that. So be careful. Always consult with your client and their CPA to make sure that everything is being done correctly for them. Any questions about the delayed process? So here's a basic 1031 exchange. If you sell for 400, you're buying equal to or more 400 replacement. You have some qualified costs. Commissions, title, escrow fees are what the qualified costs are. And then there's a loan payoff, right, of 150,000. My net proceeds is 220. That is my down payment. I get a new loan equal to or more to make my purchase. And that completes the 1031 exchange on the mechanics, and you keep title the same from property to property. If it's sold and separate, partnership, single person. So here are some of the tools in the 1031 exchange. So if you have clients that say, hey, Dennis, I'm not going to sell my property unless I know what I'm going to buy. So I want to buy first and then sell. A lot of agents don't know that you could do it backwards, where you could buy first and then sell the home that they need to sell. However, the IRS says you cannot own both properties at the same time. Therefore, the exchange company has to set up a title holding entity of one of the properties. So if you're buying all cash, we have to park the property you're going to buy with the exchange company. And then that starts the clock of the 180 days to make sure you sell your property. So then we could pay you back up to whatever you put down to make the purchase. So you have to identify it within 45 days, the property you're going to sell. So everything happens backwards, but it takes the guesswork out of what? Finding the property, because you have already found it. The second way that happens is if you're going to get a loan. So if you're getting a loan on the purchase, the lender is not going to let us hold title here. So we have to hold title to the property that's going to be sold. So now we know what property is going to be identified because we're holding that property. This happens to transfer title before the closing, which is about a week to 2 weeks before closing. We transfer title into us. That starts the 180 days. And then we instruct escrow to close on the new purchase with the new loan. Now the client has what? 180 days, which is just about 2 weeks before closing, to make sure that they close on the property that we're holding. And then once that happens, we pay them back their down payment, and then the balance remaining goes down to pay the principal balance of the new loan. So here's the reverse exchange example. So if you find me units at 400,000, you say, hey, that's a great price. I'm going to come up with my 30% down, and then we're going to go into escrow. So I'm going to tie it up, but I haven't listed my property yet. So the only thing I could do is what? Do a reverse exchange. So now, since I'm getting a loan, the lender is not going to let the exchange company hold title to this property. Therefore, the lender is going to take title to the property that I'm selling. 2 weeks before closing, that happens. And then once it closes, right, it starts my trigger. Once I sell my relinquished property at 400, my net proceeds what? Pays me back my 30% down. So I get my money back. As soon as I close on my sale property, I get my money back that I put into the replacement property. And then the remaining balance of the 100 grand pays down the principal balance of the new loan. And now the new loan is at 180,000, which completes the 1031 exchange. So all the money goes in to the replacement property. Any questions about the reverse exchange? So it's a tool to help you guys if you get in a jam, or if your client doesn't want to list the property first and then sell what they need to sell.
So some of the things that agents come across is we've talked doing these presentations. How do you identify how many properties can you identify? First thing, and what happens if it falls out that you decide not to purchase one of them, and you're at 45 days. That's more of a question for you, Jeff. If you're at 40, let's say 43 days, and the investor decides not to buy that property, then what? Well,
So
what-
basically, if you don't want that property on your list, so the IRS says there are certain requirements and guidelines for the identification. The first 45 days is the critical part. So you could buy and identify your property within the 45 days and close within that 45-day window. And that's a good identification, closing, and 1031 exchange. However, if you get down closer to day 45, like Dennis was saying, day 43, and you know some of these properties on your list you're not going to buy, then I wouldn't leave them on your list. I would revise your list on day 44, right? And submit only the properties that you are potentially going to buy, and then revise it so you get your new list, right, in there before the 45th day, so you have a more accurate list. So you could use, if you know property number 1 you're going to buy and you're in escrow, you can have that as number 1. And then you could put number 2 and number 3 as backups. But what the IRS says, you just have to buy something from your list that you give us by the 45th day. Because after the 45th day, whatever's on your list is engraved in stone by the IRS, and you must buy from your list.
is the 45 days, it has to close or?
No, 45 days is just identifying. So in this market, you probably want to get into escrow, right? To lock something up. And then you could close anytime within the 180-day period, right? So that's why you don't have to be. So 45 days identify means just putting an address on the list and giving it to us by the 45th day. However, that's what the IRS wants you to buy from. So that's why the 45 days is critical for the agent, because you want to secure something during the 45-day window period. You can actually go into contract during the escrow period of the property you're going to be selling. And then you have that locked up so you can have a really short 1031 exchange, like a 10-day, 20-day 1031 exchange. Yes, Hermit.
Hello, can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, a quick question. So identifying property like within 45 days, it doesn't have to be in a contract, right?
No, you don't have to be on a contract. No. Mm-mm.
So
So
just just identifying the property means, let's say if somebody selling like a motel and buying like an office space or like a retail space, they just say we are buying this or this. Do you need like particular address or something like that?
it has to be specific address. So it doesn't have to be on the market. It could be like a private sale. We have done a lot of private sales lately. So where they say, oh, my friend's going to sell me this property. It's not listed, right? You just know somebody that wants to sell. And then your client is selling their property, but they need something to buy. So it's like a off-market sale. As long as they identify that as very specific, if it's let's say, Hilton Garden Inn, such and such address, right? If you identify that, that's the property that you got to buy. Okay, so it has to be very specific in that sense. Office space, you got to name the address of the office space that you're going to buy.
Okay, and then after that, you can get in a contract anytime, but you have to finish the sale within
The 180
180
days. Yeah. So you could identify it by 45. Let's say by day 90, that's when you go in the contract to the IRS. That's fine, as long as you identified that property that you were going to attempt to buy is identified correctly during the 45-day period. You could go to in contract anytime and then close within the 180 days from the closing of the property you sold. So you still have that full 6 months to complete the 1031 exchange.
Is there any limit on the like identifying property?
So if you do up to 3 properties, the
Up to 3
value,
properties.
you have up to 3 properties, value is unlimited, okay? As soon as you go to 4 or more properties, then they're going to cap you to the total value of twice the value of what you sold.
Okay, got it.
So you can
Alright,
mix
thank
and
you.
match. So Jeff, you can mix and match as before the 45 days, right?
Yep. That's why the critical date is the 45th day, right? Because let's say if they don't find anything and they don't identify any properties, exchange over day 46. Okay, we have to close the exchange per the IRS's guidelines because there's no property to buy. So that's why we're a stickler. As it comes around day 35 to 40, we're sending out a reminder. Your 45th day is coming up in 10 days. Please make sure that if you want to buy a property that you send us your list by the 45th day. Okay, and then whatever's on your list is critical that you are going to buy one of those properties from your list.
Is the 45th day on calendar day, like?
Calendar days.
On Sunday, it goes to Monday?
Nope, it's all calendar days. So like during the holidays, we had stuff that was on Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. Those are calendar days. So you just have to make sure that it's either emailed, faxed, because those are all time, date, and stamped, right? With the emails, with the faxes. So it will actually state the date and time. That's why it's always midnight of the 45th day. And that's what we're looking for. And then we have a lot of people send it that 45th day and, you know, after hours, right? Like 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock.
So if you're at 45 days, and you don't have a property, is there an option? Any solution?
Yeah, there's some solutions. You could do the Delaware statutory trust properties, and we'll get into that as an option. That's one of the ways that you could keep that in your back pocket because you don't get paid to do the Delaware statutory trusts. It's a vehicle that has to be purchased through a securities rep. So the security person has to designate those replacement properties on behalf of the client. And then we work with the securities rep and them to go ahead and buy the replacement properties. So as Dennis was talking about on that, well, let's go over the vacation home first. So one of the other strategies is the vacation home, second homes, they qualify. So we did a lot of this to like San Luis Obispo, Lake Tahoe area. And other resorts are like Florida, Arizona, Palm Springs. These were all what they used. And so the property that's being exchanged and the property that's being purchased under the 1031 exchange has to be held by the taxpayer at least 24 months before and after the 1031 exchange. You must rent it out a fair market value at least for 14 days per each 12-month cycle for the first 2 cycles. So that means 2 years before, it has to be a rental for at least minimum 14 days. And after, the property has to be a rental for at least a minimum of 14 days per year, each year for the first 2 years. And then they give you personal use, which is 14 days or 10% of whatever was rented out per that 12-month cycle. So they give you 2 weeks of personal use. So we did this one like to Hawaii. And this is how they used it for their strategy. One of my friends came back to me and said, hey, we're going to retire in a few years. I got a primary residence and then I got a rental. And we're going to want to retire back to Honolulu in a few years. So what happened was the agent that they were talking to is, well, we're going to wait until you retire to then go ahead and sell your primary. You could go buy your new home, and then we'll have to sell your 1031 exchange property, and then you're going to have to buy another investment property. But they said, all I want is one property when I retire that I'm going to have back in Hawaii. So we said, you exchange first. And then how did you do that? is we did a second home, vacation home, 1031 exchange. So we sold the rental, we did the exchange, bought the new property in Hawaii for 500. We put all the proceeds as our down, we got our new loan. So once they completed their 1031 exchange, they had the primary residence here in Sacramento, and then they had the second home in Hawaii. So once they're ready to retire, they sell the primary residence, and they already had this property for what, 2 to 3 years. So they just converted it to their retirement home. And so the net proceeds here paid off the loan. And plus they got the what, $500,000 exclusion of the primary residence on the sale of this property. So by combining the strategy between the primary residence and the 1031 exchange, by the time they got to retirement, they got the benefit of the $500,000 exclusion, plus they had the property already for them in Hawaii to go ahead and move back. So this is one of the strategies that you could use under the 1031 exchange, is basically the second home, vacation home, 1031 exchange being converted to the forever home when they retire. So we did this to Arizona, Palm Springs, Florida. This is where a lot of people are using the second home, vacation home, because they could rent it out and then eventually convert it. You can consolidate. So this was an actual exchange that we did. The clients came to us and they said, hey, we don't want to deal with the tenants, toilets, and trash anymore. We're tired of being landlords, but we still want to preserve our capital gains, our wealth that we made. So they said, how do you do that? So I said, well, we buy triple net properties, right? Or storage facilities, or something that has less management headaches, and they're only having to deal with one tenant. So they opted to work with a commercial agent and buy the Walgreens triple net building, as Walgreens was their tenant. So we sold 2 properties in Folsom, 400, 500, and when you just add everything up, all the net proceeds was the down, and then you just add up all the debt, right? And our new loan was 650,000, and the loan that got paid off total was 380,000, which is new debt is equal to or more, completes a good exchange, title remains the same, and now they are traveling and in retirement, and then Walgreens just does a direct deposit to them. Plus, this was an absolute triple net, meaning that they pay the taxes, insurance, maintenance of the properties, and they pay the client rent. So there was a win-win for them because they got out of being the landlords at a pretty good price, and then they got a really good deal with the Walgreens. And that's why you could go in all 50 states. So the Walgreens doesn't have to be here. However, this was down in Bakersfield. So that's why these are the options that you have when you're doing the 1031 exchange. You're not stuck with that one type of property. If it's rental to rental, it doesn't have to be rental for rental. This is a diversification. This was a retirement, plus it was to help out the kids. This property was in El Dorado Hills, 700. We had 520 net, and they want to retire to Sun City Hill, Lincoln. But they said, we want all cash. We don't want no debt on that property because we're eventually going to retire to Sun City. So under the 1031 exchange, we bought it all cash. This still had to be what? A rental property to them. Then the secondary property, they put the rest of the cash to 120 grand. And they said, can I buy another property and have my daughter and her family live in it because they want to be in a certain school district? And the answer to that is yes. And so they bought this property, and they still had to make sure what? The kids paid mom and dad fair market rent. And this completed the purchase. So they put the 120 down, they bought it for 350. The new loan was 230, which was equal to or more than the loan that was being paid off on the rental property. And this completed the purchase of a secondary home for the kids to be the tenants. And so you could help out your family members get into certain school districts, bring them closer. Like Dennis was talking about, we're working on one now where the parents are actually doing an exchange for the kids to move closer back to Sacramento. So we have that a lot. We see that a lot. We had one where the client bought next door neighbor's property because they knew that they were selling next door. He said, hey, don't sell it to nobody. And this is an off-market deal. He says, I'm going to sell my property and I want to buy your property that is next door to me. And I'm going to have my parents sell their property that they own and live in LA. And then I'm going to bring them up here to help them out so I could watch over them. And so that's what we did. He did the 1031 exchange, bought next door, told mom and dad to sell the property. They sold. They became his tenants as long as the mom and dad pay son pretty close to fair market rent, which they did. And then he has them right next door so he could take care of them instead of putting them into a senior care facility. So these are the options where you're kind of thinking outside the box, how you could use the 1031 exchange to help your clients' personal goals and attention to the family and other situations that pop up.
Jeff, going back to the last slide, is there a way to transfer the 350,000 to the kids?
Yes, under the gift, right? So once you complete it, there's two ways, right? Either you put it under the trust, and then upon mom and dad's passing, then the kids are going to get this property stepped up to the fair market value at the time of death of both parents, right? But if you want to give it to them now, you can. You just have to take off what? The $350,000 gift that you made to them off your lifetime estate. And this is where you have to work with the CPA and the estate planner. And then this all goes to them. And now they are the owner of that property and they're going to receive everything, the cost basis, the debt, the whole thing, right? So that's why you could do it while you're alive or when you pass. So there's one or two ways to do that. The issue is when we see that mom and dad want to buy this with the daughter and the son-in-law, then what happens, there's going to be financing involved. And this becomes very challenging because that $230,000 debt now has to have all four entities on there because that's the exchanger, mom and dad, and then the daughter and son-in-law are going to be the occupant and also part owner. So you're going to have a challenge with the lender. So make sure that you talk to a lender like Dennis that understands those types of challenges, because whether or not that's going to be an owner-occupant loan or does it have to be an investment loan. And then we're going to have to make sure that the exchange is satisfied for the remaining part, because we still got to cover 300 of this property for the 1031 exchange, because we have a 700,000 thing.
This is creating a market that really doesn't exist right now. So for an example, you're looking at this transaction right here. You're trying to help the kids get a house via the parents' investment. And a lot of kids can't afford to purchase a house right now. And so what's happening is that they're saying, I can't afford it. But if mom and dad, you ask the question and go on social media and ask, your parents have an investment property? Have you thought about maybe having them diversify and maybe purchase the house for you? So it gives you an option of creating a market where you're not in competition with other agents, but also creating a new market for yourself and getting more business. So go ahead.
Yep. So the other one is to increase cash flow. This was an actual exchange. We had a Bay Area property. And they said, I can't retire because I'm only generating $3,000 a month rent from the old primary residence that I had in the Bay Area. So what we did is the agent and we sat down and we figured out if we sell it and we do a 1031 exchange, what can we do, right? And so basically, we bought 4 properties. These were in Placerville, Cameron Park, Shingle Springs, Elk Grove, and then we split it up. And so we generated instead of a $3,000 a month rent that they were getting, we kicked it up to $15,000 a month total. We bought a couple 4plexes and 3 single family rental properties for them. And by doing that, they said now they could retire. And then so once they retire, they said, great, no problem. But I said, you cannot move it into any of these properties until a few years down the road. So I said, don't retire for a few years. So when she retired, she goes, hey, I want to sell my primary residence and move into this property here. She goes, can I do it? I said, yes, just talk to your CPA to make sure that it's feasible and it's the right time to do it. And then they said, yep. So she sold her primary residence, took her $250,000 tax-free, and then moved into this property as her primary residence. So now she's not getting $2,500 more a month on this. So now she's down to $12,500. So, well, she got a beautiful house. She sold her primary residence, and then she has all these other properties still generating about $12,000 a month rent. And so she says, yep, I'm good to go.
Jeff, can they use this on their social media?
What?
Can they use, agents use this as a picture on social media, maybe getting some interest in people?
Yeah, I also have some Facebook ads that I have put together that if they want to see those, they could use those on social media.
So
So
the idea of the Bay Area part is if you know someone that the key is maybe checking in with the title company. Find out some people that have primary residence here and have a second property in the Bay Area. And then maybe tap into those people.
yep.
Maybe create some business that may not, they have not thought about. So we're trying to get some ideas out there so that you can get more business going on in 2023. Go ahead.
No, and so with the combining of the section 121 and the 1031 exchange, so if you have the old primary residence that's being converted into a rental, right? So mom and dad are empty nesters now, and then they're looking to rent their old primary residence because they bought into like a Four Seasons or Lincoln, Sun City type of retirement, but they're keeping the old primary residence as a rental. You got to tell them you have 3 years from the time you move out to still sell the property under the primary residence exclusion and get their $500,000 tax-free. Because once they go 3 years in one day, boom, automatically now becomes an investment property. And if they sell the old primary residence, they just lost their $250,000 or $500,000 tax-free. Because a lot of them go, well, I'll just move back in. You could do that, but you got to stay there for what, 2 years? And now what? The gain is going to be prorated based upon the Revenue Procedure Act of 2005-14, where anytime that you move back into an investment property, gain is going to be prorated. So they changed that, and so it's not 100% anymore. So that's why anytime you move into a rental property, gain is going to be prorated. So that's why if it's a rental property and they haven't moved back into it, they can still sell it because they still qualify living there 2 out of the past 5 years. This right here is the missed market. And this is where you have to work with your title reps or work with Dennis to find out these types of situations. If people relocate out from California to another state, that might be one of the reasons for them to sell within 3 years. Even though it's a rental property, they don't have to do the 1031 exchange, right? Because they still qualify for the primary residence exclusion. And then we hear that a lot lately. So because people are relocating to other states, and we're saying you don't have to do an exchange because you still qualify for the primary residence exclusion. And the reverse scenario is what? once you do the 1031 exchange, how soon can I move into that beautiful home that I bought under the 1031 exchange and be the primary resident, right? Resident of that property. So IRS says the property has to be a rental property. That's why the intent to hold as investment is critical. There's nothing in the code that says how long. But if you move in too soon, the IRS will flag it, audit it, and then ask you, why are you living in your 1031 exchange property? And we have seen this, and there's case studies that are out there that actually show them getting denied the 1031 exchange status because they moved in there too soon. So that's why you must hold the property as a rental, show it on your tax returns, because it takes about 2.5 to 3 years for the 1031 exchange to go through your income taxes. And that's why if you move in there too soon, you will get flagged. So we're just putting on notice. Plus, the inflationary bill that they ran in Congress, they gave the IRS, what, $84 billion to start hiring more auditors. So we're going to see an uptick in audits. So we're just letting everybody know that, to be aware. And then the other thing too is that we just talked about, there's a minimum holding period of 5 years before you can requalify for the Section 121 on a 1031 exchange replacement property. So in order to get the primary residence exclusion prorated, the ownership of that replacement property has to be held for a minimum of 5 years. Then living there 2 out of the past 5 years to get a prorated amount of the primary residence exclusion. You still get your full 250 or $500,000, but the gain is prorated. Okay, so that's why it's critical that you talk to your CPA, because it's not 100% anymore. They changed the tax law. So beware, because a lot of people are saying, well, if I move into it and live there for 2 years, all my gain is going to be gone, right? And it's all tax-free. That is not true. That's why, remember, it's going to be prorated. So what Dennis was talking about earlier, if you cannot find a property and they need to preserve their wealth and they don't want to pay the capital gains tax, if they're an accredited investor, meaning $1 million net worth or more, then they can invest into what they call the Delaware Statutory Trust properties, or the DST properties. They look like REITs, okay? So they look big apartment complex, 100 units or more. Your triple net properties like the coffees, the Starbucks, the Rite Aid, the Walgreens, the CVS's, the DaVita dialysis. You have industrial properties like the Amazon fulfillment centers. 2 of them came up last year. The one in Fresno that just got built and the one in Chicago were part of this structure. So the minimum requirement is a 100,000 per 1031 exchange. And you could buy multiple DSTs. It's just like identifying a property. You can use these as backups, right? So you don't have to put everything into the local market. You could split it up. If you can't find any properties, you could just identify these as a safety net, as your number 3 on your identification list. So that, and the DSTs are very specific too. They'll say Sacramento DST apartment complex, and they'll have an address and everything. Or if it's multiple properties, then you have to go to your 200% rule and identify that DST with the multiple properties. So this here is something that a lot of agents don't know about. So it's to be aware that it's available to you, because if you cannot find something like Dennis was talking about, you can identify this as your safety net, okay? But you gotta buy it through a securities rep. Any questions about the DST? Because we don't handle them, we just handle the exchange to and from them. Here are your opportunities, as we talked about. helping family members, right? Buying the first property, moving them closer. You could do Airbnb, VRBO, second home, vacation homes, 1031 exchanges. You could do upsize, downsize. You could go out of state. Just remember what? Assembly Bill 92. And this is the California clawback. And so you have to fill out the CA 3840. You could do estate planning. You can work with the seniors, and you could exchange into all the new projects that are being developed right now. And the DST, the passive investing, either preserving wealth or using it as a backup or covering boot. So if you don't buy 100% and they still don't want to pay any taxes, as long as they have about 100,000 of equity still remaining in the exchange, or they're going to have left over, they could put that into a DST and not pay any taxes. So
We're
just
at
to-
the top of the hour, we're at 11 o'clock. Is it okay we go for a few more minutes longer? Like 10 after or so? Okay. There's a couple of people that raise hand. A question about the DST of the list and
what was for the DST?
is there a list of DST investors or? I think someone put, I saw that on there.
You can go to, you would have to look online for like under Inland Corp. And Canton Fitzgerald, Blue Rock, Pasco. Pasco's out of San Francisco. Those are your major 1031 exchange sponsoring companies. And then they'll have a list of properties that are available on that.
Or get connected with Jeff after the meeting and he can help you get more connected on that. There's a hand up, comments?
Yes, sir. Just quick question.
Yes.
On the DST, so let's say like you reaching like that 45 days and you don't find anything and you just park it here for a little while, right? But
Okay,
how long do you have to hold it here to get back to whatever you're looking for?
Okay, so with the DSTs, it's very easy to get in and very hard to get out. So just beware, because you would have to wait until the sponsoring company sells the project, right? To either a REIT or to another investor in order for them to come back out into the local market. So it's like a parking situation, but you're at the mercy of the sponsoring company as far as when they sell it. So we say, investor beware if you do the DST, because you're going to be stuck in it until they actually sell the project and then move on.
Okay, yeah, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mine is real brief. It's really simple. Jeff and I got together, and more importantly is we're trying to create a market that doesn't exist. More importantly, people that are retiring, 55 and older, you can do a reverse mortgage. And more importantly, this program we put together is specifically looking at how do you force to get deals out of this marketplace? People that are 55 and older, maybe looking at retiring, what's the option? Under these investments in 1031 exchange, they have to be investment property. The butt of that is that you actually can do a 1031 and then like second home is move into it after what, 3 years? Is it right? 3 years? Jeff? After 3 years, right? You can move in.
Yep.
So that's the key is looking for getting creative is like, where do you plan on retiring? You have some investment, maybe some of your investment here, and then purchase wherever you're looking at settling down at, and then maybe do what's called reverse mortgage. The reason for the reverse mortgage is you sell your house, primary residence, you do financing for reverse mortgage, but it's mainly for people that are primary residents. And the down payment isn't as significant, so you don't have to put 100% pay cash for the house, you can maybe put 50% down. The idea is that so that you can free up some of their cash so they can purchase more properties, aside from maybe put 50% down instead of, so an examples I have in the handout is, someone's looking at buying a $500,000 house. Well, if you're buying a $500,000 house in cash, you've got a $500,000 out there that's dissipated. You can't really tap into that. Well, and the idea is maybe put 50% down. Use that other part to maybe give to your kids or maybe do another as an investment. So it's creating more wealth for people, but also looking at avenues of some options of what you can do with the money. If you have a house free and clear, I've got a couple of people that are doing reverse mortgages. They have their house free and clear. What they're doing with that is they're taking the equity out and purchasing house cash for their kids. So that's the key transaction that's been happening lately, is parents have a house free and clear. Yes, they don't want a mortgage, a reverse mortgage, you don't have a mortgage payment, but also if you don't have a mortgage payment and you pull out, $500,000 out of your house, you buy a house for your kids for $500,000, you both don't have a mortgage payment. So you're helping the kids' families now. And a lot of the key transactions that are coming across our tables are people that are parents live here and their kids live out of state and they're moving, or vice versa. But more importantly, the parents are more mobile, so they're moving. So finding out from your social media, your database conversations, how we're impacted by the weather. Are your parents local or are they out of state? And if they've got a family here, chances of the parents coming here are really, really high. We've been seeing a lot of them purchase properties next to their kids or close in the area. And these are ideas of helping you to create more business. You need to sit down. I can get lists of renters, investors, name, email, phone numbers, whatever you need. I can contact back to that. So went over a little bit. We're at 10 after. Any other questions you have? You can put in the chat. These slides are available.
Looks like we're all good.
Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate the time.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day. Stay
Thanks.
safe.